Hi, everyone. I'm Fanny, Marketing Manager here at Kids and Company. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's webinar. We would like to welcome Sunny Verma, President of TutorBright. TutorBright's online tutoring service gives children a personalized academic and mentorship plan. Whether the student is struggling in school or wanting to get ahead, TutorBright uses an innovative process to accomplish the student's goals and help create a plan that will continue the success in their future. Their mission is to give every student a chance to succeed regardless of any circumstances. Today, Sunny will discuss how we can set our children up for success by instilling a growth mindset. He will share tips and tricks on how parents can encourage their children to embrace this mindset for the new school year. If you have any questions throughout this session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will ensure that all questions will be addressed at the end of today's session. So Sunny, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Fanny, and so great to be part of the Kids and Company community again. I've had the opportunity to speak here for the last couple of years, and it's truly, truly such an honor. So thank you. Thank you so much to the entire community, and thank you to Kids and Company for having me back here. Now, we're going to talk about something that's super passionate to me, which is growth mindset. But before we get into the presentation, just a little bit of housekeeping. One is that my presentation roughly takes me about 30 to 35 minutes to complete. A little bit of agenda here. We're going to define growth mindset. Then we're going to go through 3 ways of how you can actually build growth mindset in your children. Then we're going to talk about why it's important. And then, as Fanny said, we're going to leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Now, to start, I really want to kind of promote a reflection between all the parents here. And that is, there is no job in this world more important than being a parent. There is no job that's going to give you more joy, more excitement, more happiness, but there's also no job that's going to give you more worry, more sadness, more suffering, more fear. And I'm sure every parent is kind of nodding their head right now. And that's because it's an honor. It's truly an honor to be a parent. It's truly an honor. There is no one your child's going to look up to more. You're going to be your child's greatest role model, and you're going to be their greatest hero. That's why this talk isn't just about building a growth mindset in your child. It's also about building a growth mindset in yourself. So I promise you, throughout today's presentation, it's just about your children as it is about you, right? Now, before we jump into this, I have 2 disclaimers. Number 1, my points come from research. They come from evidence-based theories. In addition to that, from my own experience. Some of my points may resonate with you and your family values. Some of them may not. So I ask that please only take what resonates for you and your family. And disclaimer number 2, and I would say even more importantly, please do the inner work alongside your child. Because like I said, this talk isn't just about helping your child instill a growth mindset, but the greatest way to instill a growth mindset in your child is to be the living example for our children. So please, if the points make sense to you, please do the work alongside your child. Now, last year when I did this talk or a similar talk, I started off with this quote, and I want to start off with it again because it's really important. And this quote is, let's not make this world better for our children, but instead make our children better for this world. What a beautiful quote. But the question is how? How do we make our children better for this world? 1, we help them develop self-love. Number 2, we help them develop self-compassion. And number 3, we help them develop self-resilience. But how do you do this? How do you do this? Well, in the 1990s, they were trying to theorize, what's the best attitude to overcome obstacles in our life? What ways do successful people persevere in their life? And out of Stanford University, they came up with this theory of growth mindset, which has now been tried, tested, and true. And it has shown to have tremendous results, not just for kids, but people of all ages. So let's get into it. Let's define what it means to have a growth mindset. Having a growth mindset. In a growth mindset, people believe that their success is determined through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love for learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. Let's break this down a little bit. Brains and talent is just a starting point. What does this mean? It means through your effort, actions, habits, and behaviors, you can achieve much more than you probably give yourself credit for. What a beautiful, beautiful way of looking at life. So let's talk about it. How do we actually build growth mindset in your children? Let's talk about 3 ways that we can actually build it. So, number 1, my favorite point, normalize failure. We need to learn how to normalize failure. Now, to give you a little bit of context here, I've been in the space of education for almost 2 decades now. I'm like the old geezer in the space right now. But there's a lot of honor in that because I've had the opportunity to work with thousands upon thousands of students. And every time I come across a student, I do a specific icebreaker with them. Now, the icebreaker is very important because, of course, it allows me to get to know the student and allows me to break the ice and get comfortable with them. But more importantly, this specific icebreaker allows me to understand the student's goals, ambitions, and what they really think about life. So in this icebreaker, I ask the student 2 questions and only 2 questions. The first question I ask them is a question we've all been asked before. And that is, what do you want to be when you're older? Right? Such a basic question, so I get basic answers. I want to be a lawyer, a nurse, a cop, a doctor, and it's usually said to me in that kind of tone, right? It usually has it's quite lackluster, no enthusiasm, almost a little bit of solace around there. It's like they've been asked this question so many times, so they just have this regurgitated, canned answer, right? Which is fine. But then I take the kid and I ask them question number 2. I say, in my hand's a magic pill. If you swallow this magic pill, you could become great at anything. What would you become great at? Now they stand up a little bit straighter. There's excitement in their voice. I see their eyes widen. And they say, Sunny, I'd be an astronaut, or I'd be a YouTuber, or I would change the world. I would cure cancer. I'd be a pediatrician. It's amazing. It's amazing. Just by a different question, these children give me their vast, amazing, deep ambitions, and it's such an honor. I love when they tell me what's truly what they want in their heart. It's beautiful. But throughout this, I don't want to neglect that there is a sad underlying story here. You see, I pretty much asked the exact same kid the exact same question. I said, what do you want to be when you're older? And if you could be great at anything, what would you be? Yet the answers were distinctly different. Why? Why do we suppress our hopes and our dreams and our ambitions at such a young age? Why do we? Maybe even in older ages, but why do we really push them down? Let me tell you why. You see, when I do this icebreaker on kids, a really interesting phenomenon happens. Not all the time, but more often than not, and more often than I wish. You see, when I do this, usually their parents, their guardians, sometimes their teachers, depending who's watching, will come up to me and say, Sunny, thank you for getting my child to talk about their vast ambitions. Thank you for getting them excited about their future. It's amazing to hear. But we'd love it if you could just tone it down a bit. Tone it down. Why would you want me to tone it down? Well, we don't want to get their hopes up. You don't want to get their hopes up. You don't want to get their hopes up. Then what direction do you want your children's hopes to go? You see, in this world that I live in, that you live in, that all our children live in, there's only 2 directions our hopes can go, up or down. What direction do we push our hopes? Now, parents, I'm not suggesting that parents push their children's hopes down by any means. I know that's never the intention of a parent, but it begs the question, do we push our children's hopes up? Do we push our children's hopes up? Do we hoist their hopes up? Let me tell you why it's important. You see, your children are going to have amazing dreams in their life. They're going to have amazing goals, amazing ambitions. They're going to have these vast, vast desires in their life that they're going to want to achieve. And they could be something as small as scoring the next goal in hockey or getting an A+, or truly curing cancer and changing the world, right? And the more vast they are, the unfortunate thing is that they're going to be told by many other people that what they really want to achieve in their life is nearly impossible. They're going to be told by others when they go for their goals and their dreams that it's nearly impossible. So parents, we have to be the voice of reason in our children's mind and tell them when someone tells us something is nearly impossible, we are going to focus on the nearly and let everyone else focus on the impossible. I'm going to say that again. Parents, we have to be the voice of reason and remind our children when someone tells us something is nearly impossible that we are going to focus on the nearly and everyone else can focus on the impossible. Because in that little sliver of nearly, is where the magic of life happens. It's where our children stand up and fall until they can finally run. This is where you practice growth mindset. This is where resilience is born. This is why it's important. So let me provide you with a little bit more context here and how you can actually do this for your children. Let me take you on a journey. This is a journey how I got into education almost 2 decades ago. You see, when I graduated university, I never thought I'd be in the space of education, but lo and behold, I am here today. I got a call from my friend, and she said, "Hey, Sunny, I need to tell you about my younger sister. You see, she's now on the brink of failing grade 12 English, which is something you need for pretty much every university if you want to get into. And because she's been doing so poorly for so long, my parents are now writing her off. She's becoming the black sheep of her family. We're worried about her peer group. She's really demotivated. She seems a little bit depressed. We know you're really interested in self-development. We're hoping that you can give her a pep talk. And honestly, if you'd be willing to tutor her." How could I say no to that pitch? So I agreed. So now let me take you to the day in which I first met with that student. We met at a local library. And I remember when I came to the doors of the library, right before opening them, I could feel my heart pulse uncomfortably in my chest. Because guess what? I'm nervous. I've never tutored before. I'm not a formal educator. What am I doing here? I remember thinking that. But here we are. I'm at the library, so I might as well walk through those doors, which I did. And I saw the student just sitting a couple tables away. So I walked over to her and I introduced myself. I said, "Hi, my name is Sunny. Nice to meet you." And I sat down, and I'll never forget how this conversation went. She looked at me and she said, "Sunny, it's really nice to meet you, but honestly, I really don't know what you're doing here." "Okay, well, I'm here to be your tutor. I really appreciate you taking that time to meet with me, but I've had several tutors in the past, and that's never really worked. So like I said, I don't know what you're doing here." I'm like, "Okay, I got a hard cookie that I'm working with." So you know what? I remember being in grade 12 English. I remember that there were so many essays to write, so many assignments to write. There was always this homework, and I was consistently typing or writing. Why don't we take a look and see what your teacher assigned you to write? Let's do that. How about that? We start there. She looked down and then looks back up at me. Says, "Sunny, like I said, I don't know what you're doing here. I can't even write." Whoa. I paused for a moment. It felt like forever. Now my heart isn't just beating fast. It felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I start sweating from my armpits and my forehead. And I'm thinking, what the heck did I just get myself into? I'm working with a grade 12 student who claims they can't even write. I'm thinking about packing my bags and getting out of there. But I had a moment of epiphany. You see, I had a pen in my pocket and I pulled it out and I placed it in front of her. I opened up my backpack, took out a pad of paper, and also placed it in front of her. I looked her keenly in the eye and said, "Can you write that phrase out? Can you write 'I can't write' on that sheet of paper?" She reluctantly picks up the pen and begins to write this statement out. As soon as she's done, I take the pad of paper and I hold it up. I say, "Ha, you obviously can write because you just wrote 'I can't write.'" And she laughed and I laughed. It was like a good bonding moment between us. But then I told her, I said, as funny as it is, let me tell you about the reality of what you've been taught here. Let me tell you about the reality of what you've been taught. You see, this is only funny because you've been taught it's better to never try than to try and fail. But guess what? If you don't try, you fail by default. You've been taught to never make a mistake, but the greatest mistake you'll ever make is not trying. And anything that you admired in anybody else on their accomplishment, do you know what that started with? That started with the single act of trying. Where would your life be if you just tried? Where would your life be if you're really willing to pick up that pen and actually try? Those words hit her. I knew that. She looked at me, she's like, "You're right, but I'm a failure. There's no point in this. I'm a failure." I said, "No, you are not a failure. You may have failed. You're not a failure. There's no such thing as a permanent failure. Failure is not permanent." And parents, this is it. This is the message we have to give our kids. This is how we normalize failure. So how do we do this in the house? How do we normalize failure? How do we instill this growth mindset? Here's how. Here's the best way that I know how. It's called famous failures. So at least once a week, parents, go through what I call is a famous failure with your child, right? What is this? What is this famous failure? Well, it's a famous person who's overcome substantial amount of obstacles to achieve great things. People like Michael Jordan, who was famously cut from his high school basketball team, but went on to arguably the greatest basketball player ever, or Oprah Winfrey, who was told that she'd never be a media mogul, and lo and behold, we know who she is today. It's these types of people. Now, if your children are much younger and they don't know who these people are, or who, any famous person for that matter, you can use superheroes. You can use Wonder Woman or Spider-Man or whoever it may be, because these people are trying to change the world by overcoming a substantial amount of failure. There's also these people. But guess what? I call it famous failures, honestly, because I like the alliteration. It doesn't have to be famous people. It could be someone closer to home. It could be a relative, perhaps your grandparents. And I would even suggest, more importantly, you as their parent, because like I said earlier, you are their greatest role model. You are their hero. So at least you sharing at least one of your stories of adversity to them will create a closer bond. But I think more importantly, show them that this can be closer to home as well, right? So parents, how do you do this? How do you instill this? Let me give you the step-by-step formula. Number one, do this on a weekly basis, right? And don't break the weekend when you do it. Do it every single week. It's important to instill this so we can counter out what failure currently means to our children. Especially if your child's younger, this is going to be a lot easier to do, right? The older they get, the less likely they're going to want to sit down and probably do this with you. But I'm telling you, it's still worth it. It's worth it at any age that they're at. Do this on a recurring basis. So what I mean by that, if you schedule it on a Tuesday at 6 p.m., do it every Tuesday at 6 p.m. if you can adhere to that schedule, of course. Because once it's in the schedule, our children eventually start to look forward to this. Lastly, and most importantly, don't make this a passive conversation over the dinner table. Make this the most intentional and one of the most meaningful conversations you're going to have with your children throughout the week. That means put away all distractions, no phones, etc., and prepare. So you might wonder, well, how do I prepare? How do I get who these famous people are? Even if I use myself one of the weeks, where am I going to find them? Here's the thing. A quick Google search on famous failures is going to give you a plethora of YouTube videos and articles that you can either watch with your children or read together with them. So you're never going to be left blank on not being able to use people. There's so many out there from a quick Google search. So why is this important? Why is this important to do? Well, one, it's going to redefine what failure means for our children. Failure will go from the opposite of success to the number one contributor of success, right? We're going to redefine what failure means for our children. Failure is going to go from I need to quit to I need to persevere. Our children will start to mimic the stories that we start to tell them. This is why it's important. So let's summarize. How to normalize failure. Remind your children that they're capable of more than they give themselves credit for. Remind them of that nearly impossible. Create a safe environment of trying. Actions, habits, behaviors, and effort are more important than outcomes. That's why trying and encouraging trying is critical. Number three, most importantly, go through the famous failures so we can change the narrative of failure for our children. Let's get to point number two. Opt into optimism. Now, I love this point for several reasons. One, it is one of the most valuable ways of looking at life is through the lens of optimism. Number two, what I love about this point is actually one of my major core values, and I understand it's also one of Kids and Company's core values as well. So it's great to share a core value with the community. Now let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about opting into optimism. So in my last point in normalizing failure, I took you on a journey about how I got into the space of education. So let me now take you on a journey of yourself in becoming a parent, and one of the most magical moments of being a parent. And that's when your child started to learn how to walk, right? One day you're sitting on the couch and your child's not too far, maybe holding onto the wall with their little shaky legs, and they look at you and they decide to take a step forward towards you with their shaky leg, and then another step forward, and then they fall down and you jump off the couch and you say, "Get up, baby, you can do this, get back up." And they stand back up, they pull themselves off the ground, they take another step forward with their shaky leg. You call your spouse over or your significant other, you pull out your camera, you start to record them, you're cheering them on as they're falling over and stumbling their way towards you. But when they get to you, what do? You pick them up, you go, a big kiss, you give them a big hug, and you put them back on the ground. You tell them how proud you are of them. And when you put them back on the ground, what do they want to do? They just want to keep trying to walk, right? Irrespective of the stumbles and falls that they collected along the way, they just want to keep learning how to walk. It's phenomenal. And that is because of the love and optimism that you poured into them. It's a beautiful thing. But it makes me question, what do we do when our child first falls at school or stumbles on a test or falls at an expectation that we were hoping for them to achieve later on in their life? Do we treat it like the way they were learning how to walk? No, we don't. And there's good reason for that. So I'm not suggesting that we always do that, but there's good reason for that. But let me give you the growth mindset perspective here of how we can do this. How do we actually instill optimism and great reflection in our children? And that way of me explaining this is through punishment and reward, right? So punishment, let's talk about it. The number one form of punishment in our country is called detention, right? At home, it's called grounding, right? It's a very similar thing. So what is detention? It's when you take a child who's done something wrong, something worth punishing, and you put them in detention. You detain them. You put them in isolation. And in isolation, you want them to think about three things, right? You want them to think about what they did wrong, why they did it wrong, and how they'll never, ever do it again. You want them to dwell in it. You want them to stew in it. You want them to reflect deeply on this so they never do it again. Back in the day, because unfortunately and admittedly, I was a kid of detention, back in the 80s and 90s, where you actually had to write down 100 times, "I will never, ever do this again." Even in The Simpsons, in the opening credits, Bart Simpson's writing on the blackboard 100 times of what he'll never do it again. Essentially, we do this to ingrain in your subconscious so you don't make the same mistake twice. Now, I'm all for learning from mistakes. I'm all for it. But it does make me think, what do we do when our child does something right, something worth rewarding? How do we reward them? We typically say, you can stay up a little bit later, or maybe you could play with your friends a little bit more, or watch your favorite movie or your favorite TV show, or play video games for a little bit longer, whatever it may be. And these are all great rewards. But I'd like us to think of reward the same way we think of punishment, right? So if we're going to ask our kids to dwell and to reflect on punishment through questions like, what did you do wrong? Why did you do it wrong? And how will you never do it again? Let's ask three similar questions and have our children reflect on what they do right, right? So when they do something worth rewarding, ask them, what did you do right? Get them to sit down and think about it. Why did you do it right? How can you replicate this in your future? Why is this important? Because although you can learn from your mistakes, let me tell you something. Your confidence and your resilience is born in the reflection of what you've done well. This is where it stems from. This is the growth mindset perspective that's been tried, tested, and true. This is why I recommend it. So parents, how can you support this at home? How can you support this at home? One, when your child does something right, have them take the time to reflect on it, because that will build the actions, habits, and behaviors that they're going to need to do it again and again and again in their life and feel a sense of confidence and ownership. But how do you support this at home in the microwave? The easiest way for me to tell you about this is through positive reinforcement. Now, most people are very familiar with this term, but let me give you a little bit more kind of context to it from a growth mindset perspective. And the easiest way for me to give you that is through an example. So let's just say your child comes home with an A+, right? What do we say? Right? We say, great job, or you're so smart, you're a genius, right? Typically, we comment on their success, their achievement, their outcome, which is fine, which is great. But the growth mindset way of doing this is to say, you know what? The achievement's awesome, but let's comment on the child's effort. So if a child brings home an A plus, instead of saying things like "you're so smart" or "you're a genius" or "great job," let's comment and say things like "great effort," "great job in asking for help," which is an action, "great job in finishing your homework," which is an action, right? So essentially, instead of commenting on the outcomes and the success, you comment on the effort, action, habits, and behaviors that your children took ownership on in order to achieve the A plus in the first place. And it doesn't just have to be when they get a good A plus. It could be anything that they do in their life. And the reason why this is important, because it allows them to understand innately they can take ownership over their success through their actions, habits, and behaviors. So does positive reinforcement work? Like this, does when we do positive reinforcement in this, does this really work? I've been asked by parents saying, I like that, but I don't know if it really worked. So this is actually an evidence-based way of looking at it. Let me tell you what I mean. So they took 373 middle schoolers in a study, and they subjected them to this type of positive reinforcement over a very short period of time. And in that time, they saw a 10% increase in their grades, and they saw statistical significant improvements in their confidence and persistence. Obviously, things that we want for our children, right? So let's summarize opting into optimism. Number one, create time for reflection on when your child does something well. Great time when you do this, because it's really important that we encourage them to reflect on what they do good, because trust me, they're probably reflecting on what they do bad. But also comment on their effort, not the results. Comment on those actions, habits, and behaviors that led them to the results. My third and final point, positive affirmations and gratitude. Now, the reason why I love this one is because I do it every single day for myself. It's part of my daily routine. It's also something I've institutionalized with the majority of kids I work with. And I have seen probably the highest level of success over their mental well-being because of this. So before we get into how to do it, let's talk about why it's important. It's important because of these statistics that came out in 2017. 73% of teachers feel that low self-esteem and anxiety is a pressing concern in their classroom. 33% of kids miss a day of school due to anxiety, and 25% of parents took off a day to help their children cope with anxiety. These are staggering statistics. And candidly speaking, and unfortunately, I would genuinely think these statistics are much higher today, given that we're in a post-pandemic era where mental health and youth is a more prevalent conversation. And I think our kids are seeking support more than we even know. So how do we support them, right? How do we support them? Let me give you a little bit more context here of what you can do and a little bit of background of my experience with this. You see, I was part of this experiment called the Honest Experiment. And in the Honest Experiment, we took a group of teenagers, high schoolers, and we put them into a classroom. And when they sat down, they had 2 sheets of paper in front of them. Then myself or my colleague would go to the front of the classroom and explain the Honest Experiment. We'd say, first of all, thank you for participating and willingly actively engage in the Honest Experiment. You're going to notice that you have 2 sheets of paper in front of you. That's because we have 2 questions, one for each piece of paper. Number 2, you're going to have a minute for each question. And lastly, and here's a kicker, there's no right or wrong answer. We just want you to be honest, and that's why we're calling it the Honest Experiment. Does that make sense to everybody? All the students gladly shake their head yes. They're happy there's no right or wrong answer. I said, okay, great. Are you ready for question 1? I got the nod. Yes, they're ready. I said, okay, question number 1. I want you to write down everything you dislike about yourself and you dislike about life. Oof, it's a tough question. Kids pick up their pen. The minute starts. Tick, tick, tick. By the end of the minute, we had tears dripping from their face, hand massages because they wrote so much, pages filled with what they disliked. We actually had to give them a 5-minute breather, something that we did not anticipate initially. And when they came back into the room after their 5-minute breather, I'd go to the front of the classroom and I say, okay, question number 2. Are you ready? They shake their head, yes, we're ready. So I said, I want you to write down everything that you love about yourself and that you love about life. Once again, the minute starts. Tick, tick, tick. But the results are much different this time. You see, the majority of the kids never even picked up the pen, and those who do finish within under 30 seconds. We even reversed the questions, meaning we asked the love question before the dislike question to see if that would change the results, and it didn't. Very interesting, right? Be very interesting to see where our children's heads are at, because it begs this question: why are our children so good at self-critique and so bad at self-compliment? Why is that? And how do we help them? How do we help them? Let me tell you how we help them, right? We help them through positive affirmations. So what is a positive affirmation? A positive affirmation is a positive reflection of oneself. That's what it is. It's such a beautiful thing. And it counters out this negative self-talk that so many of us have, that so many of our children start to develop, right? So it's such a good antidote for this. So how do we do it? Well, it's so simple. It typically starts with the words of I am. Two simple words. I am. I am grateful. I am worthy. I am strong. I am capable. I am wonderful. It is so easy to do. And there's thousands of I ams that we could put together. So parents, I recommend you doing this with your children. So let me walk you through how to do this. This is how you do it. At least once a day, write down 1 to 3 positive affirmations. Have your children write down 1 to 3 positive affirmations. Now, if they're too young to write, have them say it to you. And if they're too young to speak, it's better that you say it to them. Give them then the positive affirmations. And I say do it at least 1 time per day, but I actually recommend doing it twice. A good friend of mine who's a pioneer in this field said, Sonny, this is like a toothbrush for the mind. This is why you want to do it every night and every morning, just like the way you brush your teeth. This brushes out the negativity and replenishes it with positivity. And number 3, stick with this, right? This isn't like a magic cure the first time you do it. This takes time. It takes several months to see the difference in our children, but it's worth it. It's worth it, right? So what I'm suggesting here is don't break the daily habit. Instill it in part of the morning and evening routine and stick with it for several months, because what you're going to see is a slow increment of improvement. And for the students that I've done this with, I think most of their parents would have said they're unrecognizable about how they feel about themselves after a few months of doing this. So this is why it's coming from my heart of how important it is to actually create a positive self-reflection of yourself. So how else can we counter this? How else can we counter this, the negativity and the challenges that many of our kids are facing mentally? Another beautiful way of doing this is gratitude, right? So let me give you a little bit of context here with gratitude. So back in the 1990s, out of the University of Pennsylvania, they wanted to see, what impact does gratitude have on people's day-to-day lives? Is it just something that we say, like, we're grateful for something, or does it actually have higher levels of positivity towards our mental health? So what they did is they took 3 groups of people over a 12-week period, and they asked them to write about weekly events. Group number 1 was to write down about things that they're grateful for. Group number 2 was to write down about things that irritated them. And group number 3 was to write down about things that really had no emotion or no emotional discharge. Now, here are the results. Group number 1, the one who's to write down things that they're grateful for, had higher levels of happiness, more zeal for life, higher levels of self-esteem. Obviously, things that we want for ourselves and for our children. Group number 2, those who wrote down about things that irritated them and that frustrated them, had higher levels, more visits to the doctor's office, had higher levels of alert helplessness, which is the oh, woe is me syndrome, then more panic attacks and higher levels of anxiety. So reflecting on the good, being optimistic and showcasing that through gratitude makes all the difference in the world. So parents, very, very similar to positive affirmations, and you can include it in combination with positive affirmations. Have your children write down, say, or you say to them, 1 to 3 things that you're grateful for every single day. And you can repeat them, but I mean, there's millions, if not billion things to be grateful for. I'm grateful for my heart. I'm grateful for the ceiling above me. I'm grateful for the floor below me. I'm grateful for the sunshine on my face. I'm grateful for the water in my cup. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. These things, if you can actually anchor into them and spend just a few moments feeling the sense of gratitude, the results have showcased to be awesome. Now, once again, I want to suggest that it does take time. It's not something that happens overnight, and this is why it has to be incorporated into day-to-day practice over a period of time to really see the benefits of it. But trust me when I say this, the results that I've seen with the students that I work with and all the research that is behind this has showcased it to be quite phenomenal. Now, if you need more resources around this as well, Kids and Company, I know, partnered with an awesome organization called Love Power Co., and perhaps they can guide you towards them because they have really, really good resources and tools specifically for positive affirmations and gratitude. Now, that brings me to the end of my 3 points. Let's talk about why it's important. Let's go through the importance here. Now, I shared a story last year around this, but I'm going to share it with a lot more context, a very similar story. You see, one of my friends has a child who's learned how to crawl. And because they're learning how to crawl, they are now exploring every nook and cranny in their house. It is so cute. They're exploring the house. But when they crawl up to a new room, you know what they do? Before entering it in, before exploring that new room, they look back to see if dad is there. They look back to see, is dad watching them? Does dad protecting them? Does dad have their back? And that's what we want for our children. We want them to know that we're always going to have their back, that we're always going to be there for them. But not just when they're exploring new nooks and crannies and rooms in the house, but when they're exploring every first new moment in their life. Right? Like the first day of school, that could be a little bit scary. Or the first day that they have a crush on somebody, or the first day they fall in love, the first day they break their heart, the first day that they didn't do so well on a test, right? They're going to need to know that they can trust us and we are going to have their back no matter what. So how do you do that? How do you do that as a parent? You be present with them. You be present with them. If you're going to take any point from today, this is the most important point. Your presence will build trust with your kids that will lead to their well-being. I'm going to say that again. Your presence will build trust with your kids that will lead to their well-being. I was part of a survey where we took very, very successful people. And by successful people, I mean high levels of material wealth and high levels of happiness. And we want to see the impact that their parents had on them. And interestingly enough, the one commonality their parents had on them, the one commonality is that their parents made time for the small things. They made time for all the small things. So what do I mean by that? That means they went for evening walks with mom. They went for fishing with dad every single weekend. They had family board game night every Friday night, or they cooked lunch together every Sunday. This is what they did. They had recurring events and activities. This is what they had, the small things. And they said, in very commonly in these surveys, they said, when we did these things, I trusted my parents because I spent so much time with them. I got to know who they are. And in those moments, I knew they loved me and they cherished me because they spent time with me. But most importantly, when my parents told me that they believed in me, I trusted them. And in turn, I believed in myself, even when it's hard. That's exactly what we want our kids to feel, isn't it? That's exactly what we want for our kids, is to feel that to trust us. And when we tell them that they're capable, that they truly believe it even when it's hard. So parents, as we come to conclusion today, I want to provide you with a gentle reminder. And that reminder is, if you think you have a lot of time for the small things with your children, you don't. And very gently, I want to say you don't. A good friend of mine once told me, he said, you only have 18 full summers with your kids, and that's if you're lucky. That means if your child is 2, you probably got 16 summers left with them. If your child's 10, you probably got 8 summers left with them. If your child is between 15 and 16, you probably only got 2, 3 summers left with them. And that's honestly, that's if they're going to want to hang out with you at that age too, right? So parents today, what I recommend is go home, right? Or if you are home, when you see your children, give them a big hug, give them a kiss, tell them that you love them. And I want to remind you to be the voice of reason in their head, to show them that they're capable of much more than they give themselves credit for. Have them reflect in what they do right in life. Have them reflect on the actions, habits, and behaviors that lead to their success. And most importantly, what I recommend is make time for these small moments. These small moments are going to be the linkage between you and your child. And it's going to be the foundation of their self-esteem, their self-worth. And it doesn't just promote a growth mindset, but allows them to live a much more wonderful and resilient life. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you all for listening, and I'm welcome to take any questions right now as well.
Amazing, Sunny. Thank you so much for sharing all these tips and tricks with us. We do have some questions, and I would like to read them out to you so you can answer for our audience.
Sure.
So one parent is saying, how do you do this when you are tired? When both parents are tired of routine, work, taking the baby out for playtime, giving baths, giving food, how do you stay positive and not scold them?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So one of the things that there's two answers to this. Number one, so typically when our children, irrespective of their age, are doing something or are not achieving something that we're hoping for them, statistically speaking, I'm not suggesting any parents listening does this. I'm only speaking from evidence-based research. Parents do two things. One, we get upset at our children and we show a level of frustration. Or number two, we console our children because they're not necessarily meeting an expectation that we're hoping for, so we coddle them. I'm not saying either are right or wrong, but the best thing to do is to pause and to ask yourself, what is really going to help me build a growth mindset in my child, and what's going to lead to a lot more patience and love between me and my child? It takes a moment of pause before we act on one of those two impulses. And why I state that to be very important is because that in that moment of pause, you can make a conscious decision even in the most highest levels of tiredness, right? And maybe you still want to get upset, and that's fine. But if you create that space of pause, it will allow you to make a conscious decision for the overall well-being for yourself and for your child. The second to this point is that having children is the most time-consuming task. It's hard to even fit in just meals and getting them changed and all the time that they take up. So this becomes a question of priority, right? So with things like positive affirmations and gratitude, it becomes something that doesn't take a lot of time. That's why I suggested it could be a minute or two a day, honestly, and that can add a lot of value. So maybe when you're all brushing your teeth together, it's something that you say. So you can integrate it into tasks. Maybe when you're all eating breakfast together, it's something you could say. Maybe when you're driving them to school, it's something that you could say together. So I really recommend putting it at a priority and then considering how do you combine it with other activities so it doesn't necessarily take away from other important priorities like brushing your teeth or like having breakfast or like driving your children to school.
Amazing, thank you. Like Sunny said, we do have a partnership with Love Power Co., who has gratitude and positive affirmation cards for children, including younger children as well. So that is one way to practice this, something that obviously Tutor Bright and Kids and Company both believe in. So Sunny, some other questions that we have are there any age-specific strategies for introducing a growth mindset in toddlers, preschoolers, and elementary school students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when your children are toddlers, and let's say they're nonverbal, meaning that they don't speak at this age, but they can understand, basic words and some gestures, it's really important because it's really important to talk about things like positive affirmations, and maybe they're not comprehending it fully, but the tone and the diction in which you say it is something that they'll be able to understand. So if you say it with love, like, oh, you are so wonderful, you are so amazing. I want you to remember how amazing you are no matter what you go through in your life. This will make the world a difference. You'll see them goo goo gaga a little bit, but it is through the way we dictate and our tone that actually makes the largest impact. And when they get verbal enough to give themselves positive affirmations, they will start to do it with the same sort of reverence and love for themselves. So it's how you say it at the younger age. When they're getting a little bit older, let's say they're entering into the elementary school years, this is where you want to prioritize at the time. I actually recommend the usually age 6 onwards. It's maybe even a little bit younger. You can do this as a family collective, right? And I've seen this done to be really successful. So, you sit down with your family at breakfast and you all go out and saying like, what are you all grateful for today? I'm really grateful that the toothpaste was full today. And it might sound funny and you're going to hear things like that, but usually it's empty and I didn't have to squeeze it too hard. That's still gratitude. Or you know what? I'm really grateful that the sun was shining on my face. You can do it collectively and make it a family thing too. So as your children are in their kind of elementary school years, it's really, really cool to kind of incorporate that in. And they'll be a lot more receptive in their elementary years for this. Now, when they're in high school, the reception really depends on your relationship with your child and really where they are. Typically, mom and dad go from the coolest people to the least coolest people, and the friends go to the coolest people, something we probably all experienced ourselves as teenagers. So it's important to just keep encouraging them to do it, but just having your children write about it, what they're grateful for, and just a way of expressing gratitude and positivity, I think make a huge world of a difference. As your children start to grow as well, a really good thing for growth mindset, that's really somewhat underlooked, is when they do something right or wrong. So meaning like let's just say they bring home a bad report card. They'll feel bad about it. They're going to feel bad about it. They're going to be embarrassed to talk about it. But instead of making them feel embarrassed and doubling down on that, have the conversation, what's led to this? Right? Let's talk about what's led to this. Like be in having a real, honest, non-judgmental conversation around it. It could be, I didn't really study that hard. It could be, you know what? I stayed up really late instead of actually doing my homework. It was like the teacher, I wasn't paying attention at school. And when the teacher said for lunchtime I could come in for extra help, I decided I didn't want to. You could then define the actions and efforts that were not taken in order to do it and counter them out and say, okay, let's put together an action plan. So next time, what are we going to do? We're going to ask the teacher for extra help. We're going to get our homework done on time. And can we create accountability around that? You can cooperatively start to integrate accountability with your child. So instead of being reactive and be like, why did you do so poorly? Instead, talk about what's led them to the results. Even if they do something good, talk about what's led them there. Not that amazing, let's put the A+ on the fridge. That's fine, but I'd be praising a lot more about, wow, I'm so proud that you know what, you went in for help at lunchtime, or you worked with your tutor really well, or you stayed up to finish your homework in time, or you finished it before dinner this whole week. No wonder you got this result, because it instills the actions that our children need to take.
Thank you so much, Sunny. So another question we have is, how can we strike a balance between encouraging persistence and resilience, basically a growth mindset, but we don't want to push children too hard or cause them undue stress?
Yeah. Well, remove the outcome. That's the first thing. It's always removing the outcome. So let's say your child has a really ambitious goal. Say it's even I'll refer to education again, is doing a 95% on a test or getting an A+, whatever it may be. I would ask them to detach from the outcome, right? And the reason for that is the efforts are going to lead to some pretty awesome things. It may not be an A+, it might be an A-, but that's still going to be wonderful, right? Many times our kids think if we're not perfect and we're not going to be perfect the first few times around, we might as well throw in the towel, right? A point that I said earlier, we've been taught I work with a lot of kids. Many of them have been taught that it's better to never try than to try and fail. It's better to just say, I'm just not good at that, than to actually take the effort to become good at that. So it's really important to not have our children be super attached to a specific outcome, but instead take ownership on what can lead to specific outcomes. We have to also remember that learning curves are not identical. They've never have been. Unfortunately, our education system puts us in boxes that, you need to be at a certain place at a certain time in terms of your academic competencies, but it's very untrue. It is very untrue, right? Somebody can learn A really fast and somebody can learn B really fast. Things are going to take longer or shorter depending on our own natural innate abilities. But that doesn't mean we can't all get to the same destination. That's why with most students, although we set goals, what we instead do is set intentions. We'll talk about the goals, but then I'll talk about let's talk about what is our intentions here. Our intention is to do well, but why? Why is it to do well? Because I want to showcase that I'm capable. Great. Let's talk about that. What does capable mean? It means I worked hard. It means I've put in my effort. It means I've done A, B, C, and then we can micro these out into further actions for our children. And we put the action plan together and it becomes the accountability piece. So the striking the balance is when you remove the end goal or I don't want to say remove it. You just don't shine as bright as a light on it. And you shine more of a light on the path that's going to require to get there. And you remove the concept of like it needs to be done over, the next week or month or 2 months. It takes the pressure off for children, but allows them to continue on growing forward. There's also studies done from Dr. Duckworth at a Harvard University who's kind of done this study primarily with youth and what we consider marginalized youth. And I think out of all the studies that I've been part of and researched, it is by far the most pronounced is to not shine the items on the end goal. Look at the grit and effort for a child, irrespective of the outcome, and let that be the deciding factor of how they feel about their life.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So in terms of like culture differences, like are there any cultural or contextual factors that can influence the effectiveness of teaching a growth mindset to children? How can they be addressed?
Yeah, so I always want to be mindful of cultural values and family values that may be somewhat different than perhaps a growth mindset. The first thing I would look at is like, it doesn't have to be so concrete on everything I said today. You're welcome to modify anything that suits your family values and your culture, right? My objective is just kind of provide the evidence that's out there and the experience then where I've seen the results. Now, with that said, it's kind of interesting when you can culturally put it into place, right? So there's a few things that you could do if it aligns with your values. For example, famous failures can be very culturally appropriate, right? You can look at people from similar cultural backgrounds and start to instill them into the famous failure section, which will eventually hopefully normalize failure for your children. In addition to that, gratitude and what I've seen done quite often for households that have more of a religious foundation value, use gratitude as an opportunity to exercise their religious practices and beliefs as well, collectively as a family. So there's ways you can integrate this in depending on your specific family values as well as your cultural values.
Thank you. So how can we address challenges or setbacks that children may encounter while trying to adopt a growth mindset?
Yeah. Oh, it'll happen. Most kids, unless they're younger, like there's typically a sense of what are we doing here, mom, dad? Like, why are we doing this, right? You could introduce it slowly, is what I say, right? The reason why I start off with famous failures is it's a simpler one to introduce. You can get your kids if they're old enough to find every week somebody presents a new one as well. And it's a nice kind of like you could consider like a gateway into this, right? So you want to consider like not doing everything at once because it's going to feel really overwhelming and you're probably going to be met, maybe not, hopefully not, but you may be met with some resistance. So I start with the simpler ones, right? So famous failures is a simple one. There's a lot of great YouTube videos and like I said, articles on it. You can even watch a superhero movie and then discuss it afterwards with some intentionality. It becomes pretty easy to do if you can make it suitable for your children as well. So also like with famous failures, like if I'm working with a student who's really interested in let's say hockey, I'd be using hockey players and people that they're familiar with a lot more so they can start to it becomes more of an opener with them so I can find the linkage and the commonality. as we progress from famous failures is when I start to introduce things like positive affirmations and gratitude. I don't do it daily with students initially at first unless they're willing to, but I ask them to think about it, at least 2 to 3 times a week, and then we review their journals together. That's part of my job with them. Sometimes they may not want to share that with mom and dad, but what you could do, most importantly, like the number one thing that you could do, you could become the living example for your children, right? So when you start to talk about failure differently and saying the things that you've been learning, and when you start to talk about the gratitude that you have towards your life and to a multitude of things, and when you start to talk about positive affirmations and how you account for your actions, habits, and behaviors that lead you to, your overall contentment, is the greatest gift that you can give. They will watch you more than any video. Whether they believe this or not, they are watching you like they're wearing binoculars. What you do, they will eventually do. How you react is how they're going to eventually react. What you say is eventually what they're going to say. I sometimes even catch myself. I'm nearing 40. Things that my parents did that I was annoyed with, like their hand mannerisms, things that they would say, I see them coming out of me now, right? This is innate. We're going to pick these things up from our parents. So the greatest gift that you can give them to help ease them into this is become the living example of it.
And can you address some common misconceptions or myths about the growth mindset that you often encounter or that, you think we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think the one thing is that we think that it's a cure-all for quite commonly it's a cure-all in the education space for lack of resilience. It's not a cure-all, right? It is one of multitude things that we can put into place to help benefit our children. The second thing is that it can be really modified to meet your needs, right? It's not a one size fits all. I want to make that really clear. It's not that what might work for one student may not work for the other student. That's why there's ways that you could play with this and mold it to best suit your child. For example, let's just say writing out positive affirmations just feels too weird, right? For your student, there's a little bit of resistance around it. Then there's ways of doing this where you can say, instead of talking about what you love about yourself or what the I ams, let's talk about it to your closest friends or your sister or your brother or somebody else that they're really close to in your life. What do you love about them? Getting them to reflect on somebody else will eventually allow them to reflect on themselves, because you can start this at any different phase, right? There's no one size fits all. There's not one solution for this. You're welcome to modify things to make them work for you.
What are some signs that a child's developing a growth mindset, and how can we encourage those signs?
Oh yeah, it's when they, for example, like when they look at their results, let's say they've done something well, and they're like, you know what? It's because I worked really hard. That is a huge indicator. It's not that I'm so smart. If they said I'm so smart, I would try to change that conversation into, you may be really smart. I don't want to discount that. But what led you to that? Oh, you studied hard, or you tried hard, or you know, you spent time completing your homework on time, whatever it is. You really want to navigate them away from a specific identity or outcome and get them into the actions, habits, and behaviors. So the easiest way that you can see it is when they start to acknowledge their actions, habits, and behaviors that are leading to what they're hoping to accomplish, or the vice versa. I've worked with a student very recently who is not doing so well academically, and when we talked about why, he had such a growth mindset because he never said it's because I'm not smart. He never said it's because I'm not as much as a genius as the rest of my class. He said, because honestly, I don't prioritize my homework, and I sometimes leave things last minute, so I end up procrastinating. I hand things in late, which I get deducted marks. Very, very honest and open about the habits that led him there. And it's so fixable now because he doesn't have this identity. I'm not smart. I don't have to battle. Oh, trust me, you're smart enough. That's away with it. It was the actions that have led him to the specific results. So we can counter these actions now. And that is in even though the results weren't there, it's still a growth mindset.
Thanks, Sunny. We are down to our last couple of questions now. So one of them is, how do we manage a growth mindset with a child who is neurodivergent?
I It really depends on the symptoms and the degree. Um, I would you know your child best. And in knowing your child best, you probably are going to know what's going to work the best for your child. And depending on how open your child is and the degree of the current situation with your child, I would highly suggest taking an approach that you think will work best, but with the patience and the willingness to modify it to best suit them. A growth mindset doesn't happen overnight. And it's like I said earlier, there's not really a one size fits all solution. And being their parent, you do have the greatest access to your child than anybody else will have. So being open to trialing things over a period of time to ensure that these are sticking with your child, I think can do a lot of great things. But more importantly, especially with neurodivergent children, like when parents have started institutionalizing this in, like what some of the feedback that I've gotten is that it's actually made them a lot closer to their children because they cooperatively do these things together, and the cooperation led to a tighter family unit.
Thank you, Sunny. So one of the final questions is, in what ways can technology and online learning be leveraged to promote a growth mindset in young children?
Oh, that's such a good question. So we are in a completely different era than our children are in. They are exceptionally more technologically savvy than we are, and they might be have grown up with a phone or an iPad and understand the nuances and the innateness that technology actually provides them. I think the one is access to resources online is phenomenal, right? It's phenomenal. I think things like famous failures, like I have students that are just sending me YouTube links of like, hey, like this person achieved such great things. Check it out. You're going to enjoy this. So they are following individuals who are promoting a growth mindset or following resources that promote a growth mindset, which is really, really cool to see. So they have access. The second thing is that not just they have access, there's a timeliness with online. It's like when let's say your child, might just be having a bad day. They can get access immediately to a clip or something, maybe even a song. There's a lot of songs about growth mindset as well, that are quite beautiful that change their mood, right? So they have access to it. So the way I look at technology, although technology is like a knife, you need to know how to use it, or it can be very, very dangerous. But if you use it intelligently and you use it for the right reasons, it can really help promote a growth mindset, given that there's so many resources and you can access them at the time that you do need them.
And we have a final question here, which I love. So how can our parents contact you to be their child's tutor or support?
Yeah, sure. So I'll put in the chat here. My email is this, and then for general inquiries, and you're looking to get a tutor, you're welcome to research, to communicate to any of them. And one of the things I do want to say, although every executive at Tutor Bright still tutors, and I love to, that's my favorite part of my job, and it probably always will be, that I really am proud to say that I think my tutors hold the torch even higher than myself. We're really selective of who our tutors are, and it's really important for us to ensure that they're working with children on a holistic level, meaning that we're working on their mental health and well-being through things like growth mindset. We're working on their academics, of course, to ensure that we see progress in that field as well. And we're also working on their executive functioning skills, which is their time management, organization, and using tools that are really going to help benefit them academically and beyond.
Amazing. And actually, I would like to remind all participants today that there will be a recording of this session and other materials following the end of this webinar. So I will also be sharing Sunny's contact information and Tutor Bright's contact information, of course. So there will be a survey that will be popping up after this webinar as well. So Sunny, that was all the questions we have. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful presentation, all the resources with everyone here today. I also, before we go, I just want to read one nice comment that I received from a parent. So it's not a question, but he did send it through the Q&A function. And he said, "Thank you so much for this presentation. No questions today, but I just wanted to say that this resonated deeply and I appreciate the info and inspiration."
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah, no,
beautiful.
yes, thank you everyone here. And again, thank you so much, Sunny.
Thank
Um,
you.
have a great day and take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.